You know, it is a universally understood annoyance to be woken up in the middle of the night by a noisy neighbor.
Oh, absolutely.
I think everyone listening right now has probably experienced it at least once. You are dead asleep, and suddenly you hear, like, heavy footsteps upstairs.
Right. Or maybe a TV left on way too loud.
Yeah, exactly. Or just the muffled, rhythmic thud of an argument bleeding through the drywall. It's frustrating, absolutely. But it's also deeply mundane.
Because you recognize the sounds, you know they're just human.
Right. But I want you to imagine for a second that you wake up tonight at exactly 3:12 a.m. Not to footsteps, but to a scream.
Oh, wow.
And not just any scream, but a desperate, terrifying plea for help that sounds perfectly identical to the scream you heard last night. And the night before that.
Just exactly the same.
Identical down to the very millisecond of the pauses between the gasps.
Yeah, that stops being a neighborly nuisance and instantly crosses the boundary into something fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of repetition is what breaks the mind's ability to cope.
And that chilling reality is the focal point of our mission today. We have a deeply unsettling stack of source materials in front of us for this deep dive.
We really do.
We're looking at tenant accounts, official police records, and some very old, buried historical blueprints. All of it concerning a case known simply as the echoes within apartment 8C at the Blackridge Apartments.
It's a heavy one.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this because the initial facts established in these documents are just baffling. So, for 6 solid months, the landlord of this building completely ignored a mountain of frantic complaints from tenants.
6 months.
6 months. Complaints about domestic violence like screams coming from apartment 8C, and his reason for ignoring them. Building records prove that 8C was completely empty.
Completely vacant.
Right, it had been vacant for years. 0 electricity usage. 0 water consumption.
Yeah, not a single kilowatt or drop of water on the meters. I mean, there was absolutely nothing to indicate human habitation in that space.
Nothing at all. Yet, every single night, 3:14 a.m., the screams echoed through the hallway. And the tenants consistently noted in their complaints that there was something profoundly unnatural about them.
Like a recording.
Exactly like a looping recording was a woman crying, begging, and then shrieking. But the exact same desperation, the exact same timing, night after night.
I want to linger on that for a second. Why does that specific detail, the flawless repetition, why does that drive tenants to such a state of panic?
Well, the psychological toll of that specific detail cannot be overstated, especially when you look at how human cognition actually operates. We are entirely wired to detect patterns.
Because it's how we survive. Right?
Exactly. It's how we survive as a species. Our brains possess this threat detection matrix that is constantly scanning our environment. We recognize the rhythm of a walking pace, the natural cadence of a conversation.
Sure.
But human distress, by its very biological nature, is inherently chaotic. It fluctuates based on breath, panic, physical movement.
So a perfectly identical scream breaks the rules of biology. Precisely. When our brains encounter a perfectly looping human a sound of absolute terror locked into a flawless, repeating mechanical pattern, it triggers a very primal alarm bell.
It tells us something is wrong.
It signifies a profound wrongness. It tells our nervous system that what we are hearing is not just danger, but a subversion of reality itself. It's auditory pareidolia in reverse.
Wait, pareidolia in reverse?
Yeah, instead of finding a human pattern in random noise, we are finding an impossible mechanical pattern in a human voice.
That is deeply unsettling. So Maya Torres is the specific catalyst in this story. She's the person who essentially breaks that loop. She moves into apartment 8B, right across the hallway from 8C.
And she's an ER nurse, right?
Yes, she is. She works brutal late shifts. She is someone intimately familiar with exhaustion, trauma, and the actual chaotic sounds of human suffering. So initially, she chalks these noises up to her own fatigue.
Which is a completely rational defense mechanism. I mean, when your physiological baseline is extreme stress, you tend to rationalize anomalies just to get through the day.
Right. You just want to sleep. But the anomalies start getting way too specific for her to ignore. Because it is no longer just the 3:14 a.m. scream.
It escalates.
It does. Maya starts hearing scratching, and not from the hallway. The scratching is coming from inside her own walls.
Oh, man.
The source documents describe her accounts. She says it sounded like fingernails dragging slowly across raw concrete, and every single night after the scratching and the looping screams, the whole ordeal ends with 3 loud, deliberate knocks.
Just boom, boom, boom.
Boom, boom, boom. And then silence. So Maya does what any sane person pushed to the brink would do. She confronts the landlord, Victor Hale.
And this interaction is just, it's so strange.
It's deeply unsettling. She tells him she hears screaming from the sealed apartment, and Victor, looking utterly exhausted, doesn't try to gaslight her. He doesn't say she's crazy, he just replies, "So do I."
Wow. That admission strips away her entire psychological safety net. I mean, he validates her terrifying reality, but pairs it with complete inaction.
Yeah, she actually demands that he open the door right then and there, and he flat out refuses, just whispering that nothing good happened in there, and he just turns his back on her.
Unbelievable.
So Maya takes matters into her own hands. She dives into old local news archives and uncovers a tiny article from 2004 about a 26-year-old woman named Claire Bennett.
The last known tenant.
Right. Claire was the last known tenant of apartment 8C. She vanished without a trace, no signs of forced entry, and the detail that stands out. Neighbors back in 2004 reported hearing screaming for days before she disappeared. The police never solved it.
The moment she uncovers Claire Bennett's name is really the turning point of the entire case file.
Because that very night, the 3:14 a.m. screams change. The loop finally breaks. Amidst the crying, Maya hears a muffled voice sounding like it is speaking through layers of concrete, and it says two words.
Still here.
Still here. Followed by that slow, deliberate scratching, but this time it is moving upward behind her bedroom wall. And then, the 3 knocks, it is like the phenomenon realized she was paying attention.
It woke up.
Yeah. I was thinking about this, and the best analogy I can come up with is a skipping vinyl record. Imagine a record stuck on the exact same groove for years, playing the exact same terrifying second of audio over and over.
Okay, I follow you.
But the moment Maya starts digging into Claire Bennett's history, the needle suddenly gets bumped, and the record jumps to a horrifying, completely new track, specifically because the listener focusing too hard on the music. Did her awareness of Claire actually cause this entity to adapt?
That is the crucial question underlying this entire deep dive. In quantum mechanics, there is the observer effect.
Right, the theory that observing something changes it.
Exactly. The mere observation of a phenomenon inevitably changes that phenomenon. We see a psychological version of that here, the phrase "still here." I mean, that is the linchpin of that shift.
How so?
It fundamentally bridges the gap between an urban lit, the disappearance of Claire Bennett, and an immediate physical threat. When an anomaly acknowledges its own permanence, it is no longer just an acoustic imprint left on an environment.
It's aware.
It is demonstrating active awareness. It is telling Maya, I am not a memory. I am an occupant.
God, that's terrifying. So Maya is trapped between a landlord who admits the horror is real and an entity that now knows she is listening.
Not a great place to be.
No. So what does a rational person do when their own apartment becomes the predator? They call in external authority. Maya calls the police the next morning.
Thank goodness.
And this is where the narrative shifts violently from a solitary psychological terror into an objective, multi-witness investigation of what I can only describe as an impossible crime scene.
Yeah, the police reports are wild.
Multiple trained officers arrive, including an officer, Daniel Ruiz. They force Victor, the landlord, to unlock 8C, and the moment that door opens, the sensory details recorded in these police reports completely clash with reality.
The contradictions at the scene are immediate and severe.
Officer Ruiz notes the smell first.
Yeah.
Wet rot, like rainwater trapped inside old, decaying wood for decades. But when he steps inside,
The apartment is empty.
completely empty. No furniture, obviously, but also no dust. None. It is pristine, yet it smells like a swamp, and they can hear water steadily dripping in the dark.
What's fascinating here is the forensic impossibility of that environment. Let's think about the listener for a moment. If you look around the room you are sitting in right now, you will find dust.
Oh, yeah. Everywhere.
Dust is inevitable. It is mostly composed of human skin cells, fabric fibers, and environmental particulate. It's a byproduct of existence.
Right.
For a room to be entirely dustless, it implies a hermetic seal, a space clinically dead and entirely cut off from the passage of time. Yet within this perfectly sterile environment, you have the smell of organic rot and fresh dripping water.
Which brings us to the floor,
Yeah.
and I genuinely struggled to comprehend the physics of this detail from the report. There are fresh, wet, bare human footprints on the hardwood.
Okay.
But they don't just walk across the room. They start in the center of the living room floor, they walk up the wall, and they continue perfectly upside down across the ceiling, heading toward the bedroom.
It is an open mockery of gravity. I mean, the environment is actively displaying its dominance over natural law to the arriving officers.
As the officers follow these impossible upside-down footprints toward the bedroom, The physical architecture of the apartment actually starts reacting to their presence. The bedroom walls begin bulging inward.
Just physically swelling.
Yeah, like something massive is pressing against the drywall from the inside, and then the screaming erupts. Not distant anymore.
Right.
Right beside them, a living woman shrieking in terror from behind the plaster.
This unimaginable chaos.
Officer Ruiz hits the drywall yelling, "Police, can you hear me?"
Which is a standard protocol for a physical crisis.
Yeah.
He is trying to establish communication with a victim.
But it is entirely useless because the screaming instantly stops and the scratching starts. Fast, frantic scratching, circling all the officers from inside the walls.
Surrounding them.
The drywall is literally trembling. And then standing right there in the middle of a heavy police presence, a voice whispers directly behind Maya's ear, "Don't let it hear you."
Oh, that whisper. That whisper is arguably the most psychologically terrifying detail in the entire official record.
Why do you say that?
Well, don't let it hear you. It implies a hierarchy of horror. Whatever entity is whispering to Maya is warning her that she is not the only thing in danger.
Right, like there's a bigger fish.
Exactly. It means whatever is in the room with them is hiding from something even worse that lives inside the architecture itself.
Okay, I have to pause and push back on the police records here because I read the eventual official report filed by the department weeks later, and they blamed this entire event on mass hallucination caused by toxic mold exposure.
Yeah, the toxic mold theory.
And I cannot accept that. Let's look at the biology. Yes, black mold releases mycotoxins, can cause severe respiratory issues, lethargy, maybe some cognitive fog or mild delirium over a long period of exposure.
Sure, chronic exposure.
Right, but how does that explain multiple people, including highly trained officers who just walked into the building, tracking the exact same impossible physical sequence?
It doesn't.
How do they all collectively hallucinate the exact same gravity-defying wet footprints and physically witness the drywall bulging inward at the same time? Mold doesn't coordinate group hallucinations with that level of cinematic perfection.
You are absolutely right to challenge that. It is a wildly inadequate, borderline insulting explanation. From a psychological standpoint, a shared delusion of that magnitude would require something called folie douce, or mass psychogenic illness.
Which takes time, right?
A lot of time. And those conditions require a close-knit group isolated together over a long period, not a group of newly arrived first responders.
So why put it in the official report?
Because we have to understand the function of that official document.
Right, sure.
It is not designed to find the truth. It is designed to restore order.
Ah, PR control.
Exactly. When an institution like a police department encounters a localized breakdown of physics and reality, they cannot file a public record that says the building is alive and manipulating gravity.
People would panic.
They reach for the closest available rational science, in this case, environmental toxicity, to explain away the impossible. The mold cover-up represents society's desperate, fundamental need to rationalize the inexplicable. They need that excuse so the rest of the city can continue to sleep in their beds at night.
Well, the reality of what happened next in that room shatters any hope of a rational explanation. The tension in that apartment doesn't just dissipate, it detonates.
It breaks wide open.
Officer Ruiz is pointing his flashlight at the ceiling, and they all see something moving beneath the layers of paint. A long, thin, human shape crawling inside the plaster itself.
Inside the ceiling.
Yes. It pauses right above them, scratches downward, and the drywall physically splits open. Pale, waterlogged human fingers reach out from the crack, gripping the ceiling.
It is an active breach.
Yeah.
The boundary between the hidden space and the living space is destroyed.
And the audio that accompanies this breach is pure nightmare fuel. A low, wet laugh echoes through the room, then violent knocking from every direction. Boom, boom, boom.
Not just 3 knocks anymore.
Not just 3 knocks anymore, but dozens of fists slamming from inside the walls. And the screams return, but it is not just one woman anymore. It is a massive chorus of men, women, and children, all wailing simultaneously from beneath the drywall.
Just a wall of sound.
The lights completely die. Maya aims her flashlight up, and she actually sees the creature dropping from the ceiling.
And the description of this entity defies all biological anatomy.
It really does. It's a woman clinging upside down to the ceiling, but her joints are completely reversed. Her skin is gray and dripping. Her mouth is stretched impossibly wide, screaming without blinking.
And her eyes.
The report notes her eyes appeared to be sewn shut. She moves, and it sounds like cracking bones.
It's a biomechanical impossibility. It reads as if the building itself tried to construct a human being from memory using the suffering it absorbed, but didn't understand the underlying skeletal structure. It's an amalgamation of trauma rather than a living organism.
Officer Ruiz panics and fires his weapon twice. The bullets punch through the plaster and the entity just vanishes back into the walls. But the reaction from the apartment is catastrophic.
The building reacts.
The sources describe the apartment itself screaming. A deafening human wail comes from the very architecture. Pipes burst in every wall, spraying black water. Hundreds of wet footprints rapidly appear across the ceiling, running frantically in all directions.
Complete sensory overload.
As Ruiz forces everyone out into the hallway, Maya looks back at the bedroom wall one last time, and she sees faces pressing outward beneath the paint. Human faces screaming silently, hands clawing desperately beneath the drywall.
They barely escaped the environment before it fully attempted to incorporate them into the structure.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that is the end of the physical confrontation, but it is only the beginning of the real horrifying truth.
The investigation after the fact.
Right. The police seal apartment 8C permanently. The landlord, Victor Hale, disappears completely before he can be questioned. But the investigators dig deeper into city archives, and they finally uncover the original historical blueprints for the Blackridge apartment complex.
And this changes everything.
This is the gut punch of the entire deep dive. Apartment 8C was never an apartment.
He was never zoned or designed as living space.
No, it was a massive, hollow plumbing maintenance chamber, a dark, vertical and horizontal shaft meant for pipes, completely uninsulated, running directly behind every single apartment wall in the entire complex.
Just wrapping around the entire building.
And according to construction records, the builders permanently sealed that massive chamber shut back in 1978 after several laborers mysteriously vanished underground during renovations. They just walled it up and called it an apartment.
Wow.
I was trying to conceptualize this, and it fundamentally changes the horror. The Blackridge apartment complex isn't just a structure of bricks and wood. It is functioning like a giant living organism.
Alive.
And that sealed maintenance chamber, apartment 8C, isn't just a haunted room. It is the infected, rotting respiratory system of the building itself. This completely shatters the typical haunted house trope. We aren't dealing with a ghost tied to a specific bedroom. The entire building is the trap.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the true horror of this source material lies deeply in the infrastructure. We think of buildings as inanimate objects assembled for our convenience. We expect shelter.
Of course we do.
But these blueprints reveal something insidious. The victims, those construction laborers in 1978, Claire Bennett in 2004, they were just killed and hidden. They were incorporated.
They became the building.
They became part of the building's anatomy. The walls didn't just hide their bodies. The hollow chambers acted as an acoustic amplifier, absorbing their suffering and turning it into the looping echoes that plagued the tenants for decades. It transforms the very concept of shelter into a mechanism of consumption.
And it forces you to reevaluate the landlord, Victor. When Maya demanded he open the door, he said nothing good happened in there. He knew.
He absolutely knew.
He knew the building was essentially digesting people, and his role was just to keep the doors locked, ignore the screams, and collect the rent.
He was the custodian of the anomaly. He chose to maintain the status quo rather than address the profound decay at the center of his property.
So what does this all mean for us today? Because the aftermath detailed in the sources proves this isn't over.
It's still happening.
Tenants living near the 8th floor of the Blackridge complex still report hearing screams inside their walls at exactly 3:14 a.m. They still hear the slow scratching overhead. And occasionally, when they wake up in the morning, they find fresh, wet footprints on their ceilings.
But there's a new detail, right?
Yeah, the detail that really sticks with me, the one that makes my skin crawl. The footprints now specifically lead toward the air vents.
The entity is seeking new pathways. It is no longer content to stay within the sealed plumbing chamber. It is expanding its hunting ground through the ventilation system.
And that leads to a terrifying postscript in the police records. Officer Ruiz wasn't the only one there that night. Another responding officer actually resigned from the force months later.
Oh, I remember this.
His reason? He claimed that something followed him home from Blackridge, traveling through his own air vents. Which brings us directly to you, listening to this right now. We place an incredible amount of blind trust in the physical structures we live in.
We really take it for granted.
We assume that a wall is a solid boundary. We assume that the drywall and the wood and the brick are there to keep us safe, to definitively separate us from the outside world. But this deep dive proves that the empty spaces between those walls, the maintenance shafts, the crawl spaces, the hollow gaps we never see, They can hide an entirely different reality.
It forces a complete uncomfortable reevaluation of our environment. I mean, the next time you are lying in bed in the quiet of the night and you hear your house settling,
Just the normal sound.
maybe a floorboard groaning or a faint rhythmic scratching coming from the air ducts,
Uh,
you have to ask yourself a very difficult question. Are you absolutely certain you know the complete architectural history of the building you are sitting in right now? Do you know what is running behind your bedroom drywall?
because as the Blackridge Apartments showed us, a wall isn't always a barrier. Sometimes it's a cage. And the next time you wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of a noisy neighbor stomping upstairs, well, maybe just take a deep breath and be incredibly thankful that all you are hearing is a heavy footstep. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay safe out there.